So today's session is very special. Uh, we're going to do it on Agile Leadership Mastery. And for this session, I have with me Jagmohan Bhanver. Uh, I've known Jagmohan now for, I think, over 15, 16 years. And, we met when I was in the show. And since then, we've kind of continued to exchange ideas and been in touch. And he's been a great inspiration. Now, it's very difficult to introduce Jagmohan because he does so many things, okay, and all of them really well. So let me, kind of try and summarize some of his key things. Jagmohan is a keynote speaker. He's spoken in international forums many, many times. He's an author. He's worked with some of the top names in the world, Satya Nadella, Sundar Pichai, and written, quite a few books which have become bestsellers. He's also a CEO. He runs his own, kind of firm called Talgrow. He has his own People First Excellence Awards. He has a People First magazine that he runs. So he wears all these multiple, kind of hats. Very difficult to catch him. Most times he's, kind of traveling overseas or, kind of engaged with many, many things. Very grateful, Jagmohan, that you could make it for this session. Truly appreciate it. And
A
more than
pleasure,
anything
Sriram,
else,
as
yeah,
always.
he spent a lot of time in the leadership space. And perhaps, if you were to look for authorities who can talk confidently, having done the work in this space, Jagmohan is certainly one of those people. And I'm very happy to present him to you in this forum. So I look forward to a fantastic discussion. So, Jagmohan, any opening words from you before we dive into the topic?
Firstly, thank you very much for having me over, Sriram. It's always a pleasure working with you, whether it was back at, our Cesium or D Show or even on some of your other ventures. And there's just so much you're doing, and it's very exciting to be, you know, collaborating with you on this. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. So over to you.
Okay, so as usual, I think we'll have a conversational format. If you have questions in the audience, just kind of give us a reaction, or you can just pause us and we can ask that question. Otherwise, we'll have Q&A towards the end, which will be a completely open Q&A for the audience as well. And so let's kind of start off, Jagmohan, and what is this whole concept of agile leadership? Let's just kind of deconstruct it a little bit for the audience to understand, and let's then start from there.
No, that's a wonderful question, Sriram. And it's also one of the most misunderstood terms. So before I address that, we have a very erudite audience here, and you gave me the profile. So I'd like to throw the question back at the audience and ask them what is their perception of agile leadership. So when we say agile leadership or agile leaders or agile mindset, what is it that comes to your mind? Open to the audience.
I think it's a topic which basically got me interested because usually we use this agile method for more for engineering and adoption and other side of stories. So that's the reason I wanted to know what is this agile leadership on, or possibly on the same concept.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in like basics, like definitely agile engineering is wherein we ask everyone to basically, open for adoption or collaborations. Yeah.
Sure, because that's a cogent response. Thank you so much. So, and you're right, the concept of agile really started from software development, right? How could we make software development a more active, a faster process? How could we iterate quickly and come up with the final product in a much more faster manner? And I can understand as an engineer when that might be of interest to you. I also saw a couple of other comments there from people. So Girish said, being able to take quick decisions. And yes, Girish, that is a part of agile leadership. How do I take quick decisions and the right decisions? Suresh says servant leadership. Suresh, Servant leadership is a tad different, but I can see where you're coming from, because one part of agile leadership also talks about being the change. So not just about how quickly I adapt to change or get people to adapt to change, but also how, as a leader, I can be the change myself, right? And I mean, for the folks here who are from India, and I can see most of the audience here is from India. You remember, Mahatma Gandhi said that, be the change that you desire to see in the world. So, and servant leadership is very similar. So yes, there is a connect between servant leadership and agile leadership in that sense. Prabhakar is voicing that, being the change itself. Yes, Preeti.
Hi, morning all. Actually, good evening, sorry. I think in my mind, two things come prominently. One is the whole shift from authority to collaboration, right? Idea can come from any part of the team. So that is very important. That's one part. And second is a disciplined and structured approach to getting things done faster, because I think from where I started 20 years ago to today, the expectation of business is also massively changed, right? So how do we partner to ensure that the speed at which the business is evolving, we as HR partners are able to evolve? So I think, I know long answer, but that's
No,
my
that's
thinking.
okay. You're pretty much on point. Perhaps if we have time later, I would want to challenge your one part of your thought, which is allowing everyone to come up with their ideas and contributing. While I appreciate that thought, and I think leadership is all about enabling contribution, but I would want to just throw a point out there for the audience, and we can pick it up later. Who are the people that as a leader I should allow to contribute? Should I allow everyone to contribute, irrespective of their competence? Or should I allow people to contribute after I have, as a leader, made sure that they're in a position to be able to contribute meaningfully? We don't need to solve that problem right now. It's just a thought I wanted to leave there. But thank you so much, Preeti, for that response. Merlin says being a catalyst to bring the change in colleagues, and that's right, Merlin. Being adaptable, being flexible. So a lot of comments there. Thank you so much. I think we've captured more or less the essence of agile leadership. So why don't we play a game here? I'm not given too much to talking to the audience, and I'd like to involve you a bit. So Sriram, with your permission, can I share my screen if that's all right?
Yes, certainly. Yes.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, do let me know if you can see my screen. Are you able to see this?
Yes.
Okay. That's a Labrador out there, very much part of the family. You might hear him barking every now and then. We'll obviously try to shut him up, but very difficult to control the guy. All right, can you see this here? There are about 25 to 28 descriptors I've mentioned there. What I'd like the audience to do is is to tell me which of these you feel relates to agile leadership in a positive manner. No particular order. I mean, you could just unmute yourself and call out a few of these. All right, waiting.
Decision making under ambiguity.
Okay, I'm just gonna color that one. Fine.
Empowerment and adaptation.
Adaptation and empowerment. Where is adaptation? I remember putting it somewhere here.
Clear purpose.
Just below empowerment, adaptation, you have empowerment.
Adaptation and empowerment.
Okay, got it. Thank
Feedback
you.
loops.
Transparency and trust.
Feedback loops, is it? Just a moment.
Right in the center. Below empowerment. Yeah.
Below empowerment, okay. And somebody said something else. What was that?
Transparency and trust.
Transparency and trust. Okay. Okay. Where is transparency? I got that one. Anything else?
Flexibility.
Flexibility. Okay.
Clear purpose.
Clear purpose. I was wondering if that's going to be picked up. Okay. Anything else?
Collaboration.
And that is the first one I selected unwittingly. Okay. Anything else?
Focus on possibilities.
Focusing on possibilities. Okay.
Iterative process.
Iterative processes. Is that an engineer speaking? Okay. Iterative processes. Yes, very much. Anything else?
Continuous learning.
Continuous learning. Yes, absolutely right. At this stage, people are probably wondering, is everything there part of agile leadership? But let's see. Okay. What else?
Market sensing. Market sensing.
Market sensing, sensing the market, doing environmental scanning. Yes, very much.
Mentoring.
Mentoring. Yes. What else?
Positive conflict.
Positive conflict. Yes.
Set goals.
Shared goals. Okay.
Intelligence.
Intelligence. I want you to think a little more about this and then decide whether we should put it out there. For the moment, I'm just marking it in orange for the moment. Okay. Anything else?
Definitely individual competence.
Definitely individual competence. When something is definitive, I'm usually a little suspicious of this. So let's put this in orange there. And let's have a healthy debate on this a little later. Okay.
Coaching.
Okay, sure. Let's
Positional power.
Positional power. Okay, where is positional power? This one probably goes in red.
Shared
knowledge
knowledge
systems.
systems.
Shared knowledge systems. Yeah, very much part of Agile. Anything else?
Stability.
Stability. I put that in there as a bit of a googly, if I may say so. I'm going to put this in orange for the moment. That's stability for a business is good. Without stability, nothing works. Organizations, governments, nothing. But if you have too much of stability, that stability then tends to put you into a comfort zone where you're not able to think beyond anything. So in psychology, we call it status quo bias. You get so comfortable with that stable position that you're in that anything beyond that makes you uncomfortable, and therefore you do not want to move beyond that. And if you don't do that, agility tends to suffer, and that's why I'm putting that in orange. Okay,
Right.
What else?
Competitiveness.
Competitiveness was another googly. To a level, competitiveness is good because it gets people to challenge themselves. But I want you to consider the other side of competitiveness, which is, let's say Sriram and I are very competitive, and so are other folks around us in the organization. A point comes when we start looking out for ourselves. We start looking out for our own meritocracy. How can I become that rock star? And in the process, I've seen over the years, collaboration tends to suffer. So competitiveness at times gives rise to what we call a competence-based culture. And I'll talk about it a little later if the opportunity presents itself. It can stymie the collaborative culture and collaborative processes, hence in orange. So it's good to a point. Beyond a point, it becomes a bit of a challenge. What else? No takers for the other 5 things which are still left blank. Fixed hierarchy. Is everybody sure that's not part of Agile? Okay. I guess so. So let's put this in red. What about established processes?
No.
No. So again, established processes are a bit of a, they're complex because to a level, established processes help move the business forward. But if we get too involved with established processes, we stop looking beyond what that process was intended to do And therefore, to iterate that process becomes difficult. And as you notice on the bottom left-hand side, iterative processes is what really pushes forward agility. So this one goes again in orange, not in red, orange. Okay, what about set goals?
Again, no, because it sort of suggests a prescriptiveness to the entire thing.
Very true. So set goals again. I mean, nobody can really progress unless there are goals. But if we get infatuated with established goals and we are unable to look beyond those, then it's like moving towards a destination and then being rigid when anything tries to move us away from that destination. And that really affects adversely agility. Rigidity, I think, is a fairly self-explanatory concept. It would be the exact opposite of what we would want in agility. So let's just put that in red. What about organizing for others? Organizing for others.
Again, a no, because you're setting boundaries indirectly.
Fantastic. Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, to a point, it's fine, but I'd rather help people self-organize than organize for them. So I'd rather enable them rather than do it for them. And you beautifully said it's more prescriptive. As a leader, at some stage, I would want it to become non-prescriptive and more self-driven. Okay. So if you look at this chart now, you really have a very definitive definition of sorts for agile leadership. So what we're really saying here is clear purpose is very important. So everything starts from having a clear purpose, making sure everybody understands the purpose. There are shared goals. Then you're looking at building a culture of trust where people are able to rely on each other, bank on each other. They're flexible. They're willing to collaborate with each other. And remember, collaboration is now happening in a direction because there is clear purpose and there are shared goals. So collaboration without a clear purpose, again, would make no sense at all. So before collaboration begins, you need to ensure as a leader that the purpose has been clarified and there are shared goals. Decision-making under ambiguity. If you go back to the COVID situation, and if you go back to any major transition that has happened in the world, you will find that the organizations that really succeeded, or the people that really made it, were those who were able to take quick decisions and the right decisions, or rather take a decision at all, even when they were facing uncertainty and you know, when they were faced with a paradigm which they were not used to. Those people who had what we call uncertainty avoidance were unable to take decisions. They actually got paralyzed and decision-making wasn't happening. So not taking the right decision was not as bad as not taking a decision at all. And agile leadership, what really it does is, because it empowers people, and you've taken pains to mentor people, to coach them in a particular way to think for themselves, people are able to take more autonomous decisions, and therefore decision-making under ambiguity becomes easier. So if you look at all these green markings there, these are really what we call aspects of agile leadership. Now, since you've helped me out with this, I thought, let me just show you this slide. Now, normally when I'm doing programs around agile leadership or coaching leaders, I've noticed people tend to confuse the outcomes of agile leadership with what is enabling it. So what I've done here for you is I've demarcated these. I have the enablers on one side and the outcomes on the other. Now, I've just put down about 10 of those outcomes. There could be another 20 of those. But my focus is really on what's enabling the agile leadership. So enabling culture, and we'll talk about that in a bit. I'm sure Sriram will have questions around it. What kind of a culture or what kind of a cultural construct within the organization or even a team will help people and businesses be more agile, right? So that becomes an enabler, because the culture will enable a lot of stuff which is there on the right-hand side in outcomes. enabling alignment of vision. So it's not just enough to have the vision articulated, but as a leader, have I made sure that that vision is completely understood across the organization the way it was meant to be understood? That becomes the second enabler. The third is really what we call enabling leadership. And within enabling leadership, you got coaching, you got mentoring, and you got catalyst. Now, if you look at coaching and mentoring, they're very different processes. In mentoring, I would probably guide the person by telling them what would be in their interest to do, right? Coaching is more of a facilitative process where I ask a lot of questions and enable the other person to think for themselves and evolve solutions. Now, if you think about it, most leaders are given to prescriptive solutioning. But what coaches do is instead of prescribing a solution, they enable you to figure out your own solutions. And catalyst is entirely a different thing. So when you're talking about being a catalyst as a leader, what you're really saying is, am I able to inspire people to take action that needs to be taken? Am I creating an ecosystem for them where they're able to really get nurtured, think for themselves, and do quantum times more than what they would do on their own? And the other part of enabling leadership is, of course, creating feedback loops where the organization has feedback systems put in place, where people can keep talking to each other, having conversations, and which aid the reflective process, the self-reflection process. And therefore, if you do all of that on the left, you have what you see on the right, which is growth for the organization, the people, the business, collaboration, and so on. So collaboration is not an enabler. Collaboration will happen when you set the right culture in place, when you've got the right leadership behaviors in place. So collaboration is actually the result of what you do as a leader, right? I'm going to leave the slide here for a minute or so. If there are any questions that you want to ask me here, feel free to do so before we pass the baton back to Sriram. Any questions here? All right, fantastic. So, Sriram, to answer your question, in terms of what is agile leadership, it's actually a lot of what the team just mentioned and what I've added to it. Any thoughts that you might have on agile leadership beyond this, Sriram?
No, I think it's fantastic what you presented over there. And, I just want to go deeper into some of these, critical things that which leaders are expected to do. And in the context of Agile, how should they kind of go about it? So first thing I want to start off is with respect to communication. Okay. So with the construct of Agile, what is the impact on leadership communication per se?
Okay. I think that's a good question. Let me just reverse it though. So I would put it more like, how would leadership communication impact Agile?
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I've noticed, and I've had the privilege of working with some very smart and capable leaders across the world as part of their coaching process. And one thing that I realized is what differentiates really agile leaders from the not so agile ones is what they focus on. It's where they lay the emphasis. Most leaders I've found who might be good but not as effective focus on the what. So when they're talking to the teams, they're talking to stakeholders, they're talking about what needs to be done. How should we do it? And those are good things to focus on. I mean, unless you know what needs to be done, how to do it, how are you going to do stuff? But the really agile leaders focus on something which is way more important. They start the communication by defining the purpose. So they focus on the why. Why are we doing what we ought to be doing? And more to the point of your question, Sriram, when a leader defines the purpose to the action, when the leader talks about the why, that is where collaboration truly begins. I mean, how are people expected to collaborate with each other when they don't know what they are collaborating on or why they are expected to collaborate with each other? How is this collaboration going to transcend into something meaningful for the business of the organization? If I don't know that, I am not invested in the process of collaboration. Defining the why enables the collaboration. It does something else. When I know why what is happening, I feel that I am a part of whatever is happening, which means I have greater involvement, greater engagement in that entire process.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at it, I have kids who are, one of them is working, the other one is in college, but even today, even when they were young, when they were infants, if I had to tell them something and I asked them to do something, I don't know whether it's just my kids or that's, across the world now, but they would always ask me, why do you want me to do this? And I realized that even for a kid, it was very important to be able to explain to them the purpose of what is being asked for them to be, doing. Now, replace that with senior corporate executives. And those guys are surely going to want to know, why are they expected to do what they're expected to do if the purpose is not clear? You may get stuff done temporarily because of positional power that you exercise over them, but their heart is not going to be in it. They're not going to own it completely. Accountabilities are going to be low. So as a leader, you will end up pushing them to do it rather than getting them to come up with more ownership to do it and go beyond what is expected to be done. So if you ask me leadership communication, I would say start with why. The second part is collaboration. So the clear purpose has been established. We know what we need to collaborate on. Now, most leaders I've seen tend to push collaboration. So in organizations that we worked in, Shriram, and these are some of the better ones, where you'll find a lot of leaders saying, guys, we need to collaborate on this. Come on, let's collaborate. The very fact that a leader has to ask people to collaborate means there is something that has been missed. Collaboration cannot be pushed. Collaboration needs to be enabled. You facilitate collaboration. So as a leader, what I would do is I would say, okay, I have guys who are smart people. They're competent people. So in HR language, let's say they're D4 guys, they're high in competence, high in commitment. Let me ask them, what are their thoughts on this? So, okay, this is the purpose. This is what we're doing. What do you think we ought to be doing on this? What contribution do you bring to the table? So after the why has been addressed by the leader, the second part is, how am I enabling the conversation, the contribution? That becomes the second C out there for Agile. And the third, of course, is commitment. Most leaders expect their teams to demonstrate commitment. But one of the things I've seen Agile leaders do is they measure continuously their own commitment in the eyes of their teams. If I do not demonstrate ownership as the leader, how can I expect accountability to be given to me by the team? So one of the things I recommend to all the people that I work with as a coach is, when you go back, think about it. If you were to ask your team to rate you on a scale of 1 to 10 on your commitment to the business, to the organization, what would they rate you on a scale of 1 to 10? If it's a 9 or a 10, you're in a healthy space. If it's less than 9, say it's an 8, well, you've got some work to do. If it's less than 8, you've got a lot of work to do. So the 3C framework for a leader, the communicating the why, enabling collaboration, and 3, testing commitment. Testing your own commitment before you can drive the commitment. I think those are 3 things I would really want to leave with colleagues here when it comes to leadership communication.
And so I think, while we understand that, communicating the why is pretty commonsensical in terms of saying, okay, it has to be done. But from your experience of dealing with people, does it happen enough?
I've noticed a strange thing, and I must confess I have been party to this for many years as well. during my tenure as a banker, later on in other industries as well. While it's the most commonsensical thing to do, it's also one of the things which leaders tend to miss out the most. I think in their mind, they just expect that people will know why we are doing it. And therefore, it's not important to mention it up front. The other reason leaders do not mention it is because sometimes, Shira, I mean, it's very surprising. Sometimes the leader themselves is not clear why they're asking the team to do something. They're probably just asking the guys to do it because they've been asked by somebody else to do it. They have not questioned the why, and therefore they just expect that the other person is not going to question them on the why itself. Thirdly, and that's not a great situation, but sometimes the leaders just don't think it's important to communicate the why. Isn't it enough that I'm asking you to do it? Just do it. Why do you need to know the why?
Yeah, because I think, many times when I'm researching on peak performance, this whole aspect of inspiration and motivation and all of that boils down to the fact that do I see meaning with respect to what I'm doing, right? And if the why is not clear, then even though I may be earning enough money and I may be doing the right things, the fact is I don't see it enriching, me. And eventually good performers actually leave because, they want purpose, they want meaning with, okay, I'm doing something that is meaningful. And that's really the missing part as a, kind of.
Let me give you an example. I'm sure the guys here would, love examples. So I've done a lot of work with Google, and I'm sure a lot of people here use one of the apps that I'm going to talk about. But before that, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag. At Google, many years ago, you had this concept. They created a group, an elite group for product managers, in which you could only be a part of it if you were a computer engineer. I don't know how many computer engineers there are here. They were probably like this, but the non-computer engineers were not. So there was this very elite group within Google. And mind you, Google has been somewhat of an agile organization. So I'm taking an example where even within an agile organization, you may have situations where they move away from it. And then what happens? So there was this situation, and then there was this guy out there. He was not a computer engineer. I think he was an electronics engineer. And he said, I want to be a part of this too. I mean, am I not part of Google? I'm committed. I want Google to be successful. Allow me to be part of this. And the powers that be at Google said, no, but you're not a computer engineer. And this guy was saying, but why is it important for me to be a computer engineer, to be a part of this elite group? They did not answer the why. Well, this guy moved out of the organization. He moved out of Google. A year later, he came up with an application, which is now known as Instagram. The guy's name, if I remember correctly, was Kevin Systrom. Instagram was later on picked up by, was it Facebook? Facebook, I think, right? For about $1 billion or more.
Yeah.
When you do not address the why, talent is going to be demotivated. Talent is going to be disillusioned. They're not going to feel engaged. They move out, or worse still, they stay in the organization, but then they're part of the furniture. They do not have the willingness to contribute anymore.
So let's just shift a little bit and, so how do you see Agile in terms of paradigms? What's the relationship? Just take us through that.
I think that's a great question. So for the audience, anybody here who would want to articulate for us what a paradigm shift is? Anybody? I sometimes get tired of hearing my own voice, so it'd be good to hear somebody else's. Have you heard the term paradigm shift? And what's your understanding of paradigm shifts? Okay,
I guess where you even sort of change your assumptions.
Excellent, Prabhakar. So a paradigm basically is a set way of doing things. It's a pattern, a way of doing things, a way of thinking, right? So for instance, paradigms are good. You're going on a Mumbai street or anywhere else in the country, you have a green light which tells you I gotta go. And if it's amber, it means I got to start slowing down. And if it's red, I got to stop. Now that's a paradigm. It's a set way of doing things. It's useful because if you do not have those rules, there'll be chaos. People will be banging into each other. Of course, in Mumbai, they bang into each other in any case, despite the paradigm, but that's a different point. So when does a paradigm become limiting? A paradigm becomes limiting when we get so infatuated with the way that we do things that we are unable to look beyond it. Now, let's take another example. And I know most people think of Kodak when we talk about paradigms. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about Kodak. Well, forget it. Let's talk about Kodak. Why not? Why do you think Kodak went out of business, guys? And I can tell you it's not the reason that you think it is. So why did Kodak run out of business?
They did not change with the changing times and where the market was heading or what the customer wanted.
Right, Sunil. So what you're saying is they were into analog, and when digital happened, they then moved to digital, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic answer. Now, Sunil, most people feel that Kodak didn't shift to digital because they didn't have the technology for it, right? And I was very surprised when I was doing some work for Kodak many years ago, many years ago, actually. In fact, not even Kodak, one of their partners. I found out Kodak was amongst the first companies in the industry in the world to have figured out the digital technology for cameras. Now look at this. How baffling is this? You are Kodak. You are the #1 camera seller in the world. You have almost 78% market share on camera films around the world, and in the US, about 92%. You also happen to be the first camera manufacturer to develop what is called digital technology. I mean, this seems like fantastic. I mean, you would take it, you would start coming up with digital cameras, you would rule the world for the next 40 years, right? The guy who discovered digital was a guy called Steve Sassoon. He was the chief engineer at Kodak. He was the first guy in the world to really come up with it, the prototype for the digital technology. But when he went to the Kodak management, the powers that be, and he told them about this, the response that he got was, but why? We've always done we've always done analog, right? And then comes the fear of the unknown. But if we shift to digital, we have 78% share of the world market on the camera reel business. There will be no reels. We'll end up cannibalizing on our own business. Can you even fathom the arrogance of this approach, of this thought? Just because we are not going to move to digital, nobody else in the world is going to move to it. I mean, that's the assumption there. And these are very smart people. What was stopping them from making that transition? It was not a lack of intelligence. It was basically that comfort level with established way of doing things, the paradigm that we have always done analog. And even though they were the first to figure out digital, they didn't move into it unless the Fujis and the Sonys and all the other guys in the world had done it. And then when they did it in a half-hearted manner, and the rest, as they say, is history. Sticking to paradigms is the exact antithesis of agile leadership. It kills agility like nothing else does, which is why for agile leaders, it's very important to be able to think beyond the paradigm, to say, okay, rather than the external environment changing the paradigm for me, how can I disrupt my own business? How do I make the shift from this paradigm and create a new paradigm for others? And that really is agile leadership.
I think a similar story with Nokia also, right? That, top of the world, and then, it is just you move too late despite ruling, something kind of similar as a.
So, Shriram, about 10 years ago, I was coaching the global CEO of one of the top 3 telecom companies. Obviously can't name them. And at that time, the entire coaching exercise was centered around trying to move the person away from the paradigm, the existing paradigms. unfortunately, that's not one of my success stories. We were not able to do that. And that company disappeared. Now, if you look at the telecom business, the mobile business, you will find there was Nokia. They were ruling the world at one time. Then there was Motorola ruling the world at one time. There was BlackBerry, which was really big, especially in the corporate space. Where are these companies today? I mean, BlackBerry started reinventing them, so that's a different thing. But the others, they've just gone down. I mean, sure, Microsoft acquired the Nokia mobility business when Steve Ballmer was stepping down. They paid a few $1 billion to acquire that. But the first thing that Satya did when he took over as CEO of Microsoft in 2014 was within the first 1 month, he hired over that business altogether. Now, that is again an example of agile leadership, being able to recognize what doesn't fit into your business or what is going to keep you stuck in a paradigm, and then having the courage to move away from it, even if it's a tough call.
I think the other point that you mentioned, of course, related point is on disruption. So I want to ask you, so what drives what? Does disruption drive agility, or does the agility result in disruption? What's your take on that?
You know, the beauty of this webinar is that we are covering a topic which usually I take 3 days to do in a workshop. And therefore, I'd really like it if the audience here excuses me if I'm, skimming over some of the things. But that's a great question, Shriram. So disruption happens because we are agile. If we are not agile, we get disrupted, if that makes any sense. So if I'm agile, I will create positive disruption within my business. I will disrupt my business, the industry, and 20 other industries related to it. Like what Twitter did with the news sector, for instance, right? Twitter disrupted the way the news industry works. What a Airbnb did with the hotel industry, what an Uber did with the cab industry. These are disruptors. But if you do not disrupt, and if you're not agile, somebody else is going to be disrupting your business model. Like, where is General Motors today? And where were they, say, 20 years ago? Right? Where were some of the top hotel chains earlier, 20 years ago? Where are they now? How many people here have heard of a company called Blockbuster? That's one of my favorite cases. How many guys have heard about Blockbuster here? You can just raise a hand or maybe show us your face. All right, Shriram, of course.
I do.
Shravnan. Shravnan,
That's right, yeah.
Blockbuster was one of the largest, not one of, it was the largest retail store selling movie videos, correct? Based in the
Rentals,
US?
yeah, correct.
Yeah, movie rentals. And they had more than 5,000 stores just in the United States. And beyond the United States also, they had a lot of Blockbuster stores. Now, Shriram, if you allow me, I want to share my screen. There's a very, very interesting thing I had here. I was thinking if this is going to come up. So thank you so much. Where is Blockbuster? Should be having it somewhere. Yep. Is this visible? All right. Now, if you look at it, so Blockbuster, founded in 1985, and in 1994, Blockbuster's valuation was about $8.5 billion. 3 years later, Netflix was founded in 1997, and I mean, obviously, the revenues were zilch at that time. In 2000, Netflix was valued at $50 million. At that time, the valuation of Blockbuster was about $9.5 billion, right? So you could say about 200 times the valuation of Netflix. Now, a very interesting thing happened. The Netflix co-founders, I remember one of them, Reed Hastings. Reed Hastings, the co-founder of Netflix, goes to the Blockbuster office, and they have a meeting with the chairman and CEO of Blockbuster. This guy's name was John Antioco, okay? And Netflix offered to be acquired by Blockbuster for $50 million. And they said, we're happy to give you 49% equity in Netflix. And John Antioco and the rest of the Blockbuster team literally laughed them out of their office, right? Some of the language might be unparliamentary to use here, but let's just suffice to say they walked them out. I mean, they laughed them out of the office. This was in 2000. In 2010, so in the next 10 years, Blockbuster was defunct. They were bankrupted. And in 2010, the valuation of Netflix, what you see there, $24 million, is actually the valuation of Blockbuster, which was almost zero, because they had a debt of more than $1 billion. But the Netflix valuation in 2010 was close to $10 billion, which means they were valued more than Blockbuster had ever been valued at their peak. And by 2020, Netflix was valued at $203 billion. Today, they're valued at more than $250 billion. So what is it that Netflix did, which Blockbuster did not do? Netflix is what we call a disruptive innovation business. Look, sometimes when you talk about innovation, we tend to use innovation as a generic term for anything. Innovation could be efficiency-based, which means how do I innovate so that I can reduce the price of the cost of production? If the cost of production is low, then I can sell at a higher price at a higher margin. The other is I could say, okay, how do I use sustainability innovation, sustainable innovation, which is what Toyota does a lot. Same price, but I add more features, more functionalities. But the real truth, or the real moment of truth, is in what we call disruptive innovation. Disruptive innovation is when you, or rather what you do to your business so that it has an effect not just on your business, but it has a ripple effect, a butterfly effect across the industry, and at times impacts other industries as well, right? What Netflix did was disruptive innovation. They disrupted the way movie rentals happened. So Blockbuster was selling out of brick and mortar stores. They were renting out things, and they've been doing a good business. What they did not do was they were not doing market sensing. You remember one of those things on my first slide, which you saw in the earlier in the day? They were not doing market sensing. They were not listening to their customers. The teams didn't feel empowered, the store managers, so they had absolutely no motivation to tell the corporate officers what to do or what they were hearing from the customers. The customers were really upset because Blockbuster was charging them a penalty. So let's say I hired the DVD for 24 hours, but I returned it 48 hours later, and I'm paying a penalty which is almost equal to 50% of what I was paying as the original fee. They were not happy. So Netflix got onto this, and Netflix said, okay, how do I reduce my costs? So instead of having brick and mortar stores, let me just do a mail order. Now this was efficiency innovation. Just do a mail order. I don't have to pay rentals for stores. Then they did another thing. They said, okay, look, keep it for 48 hours, no problem. Keep it for 72 hours, we will not charge you a penalty. So they gave more functionalities, more benefits at the same price. This is sustainable innovation. This is where they went to Blockbuster to try and negotiate the deal. But what really changed the business and what put Blockbuster in the ground was when Netflix came up with disruptive innovation. So here is what they did. They said, why do I need to give a movie DVD out for rental? Why do I have to put a timeline to how long my customer can retain that video title? What if I could just give it to them and they could keep it with them as long as they wish? And that thought process, how do I change the business, the way the business works? That led to the current concept of Netflix, which got into the subscription business, and the rest, as we know, is history. Disruptive innovation comes when people are willing to look at beyond what is happening, when they're willing to recognize that there might be blue oceans out there, markets that have not been tapped into by anyone, them or the competitors, and be willing to involve the rest of the team to see how we can innovate to address that space in the market which is still missing. So Sriram, to answer your question, if you are agile leaders and you have an agile team, it becomes that much easier to build a disruptive business.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you one last question and then open it out to the audience so that we have some time for discussion. We know that, what got us here may not get us there, and we inherently rely on our past experiences, to kind of make decisions or even to, kind of decide how we're going to act. So what is your recipe for leaders to stay agile and relevant?
That's one of the most cogent questions of the day. Whether it's a leader or a product or a business or an organization, unless these entities are reimagining or reinventing themselves, we are bound to get extinct. And we've seen that with Netflix, sorry, with Blockbuster, we've seen that with Kodak. I have seen leaders, and if there are HR folks here, you would have seen that there are people who one day were what we call high potential talent. And 4 years later or 6 years later, they've probably got a pink slip, or suddenly they've got into a D2 mode where they're neither competent nor committed, right? So what's happened? Has the person changed? Did we diagnose them wrong as a high potential talent? Not really. It's just that they were a high potential talent at a point in time because the paradigm at that time was different. The ecosystem was different. In today's context, because they've not kept pace with the changing dynamic, they have become defunct. There is a very interesting concept which we talk about in strategic management. It's called the sigmoid curve. Again, engineers here might be familiar with this. Engineers, you have an unfair advantage over most of the other folks, guys. But how many people who've heard of the S curve or the sigmoid curve, guys? You can put your hands up. Even product managers would be familiar with the concept. It's also called the PLC curve. No? Nobody? All right, Prabhakar. So if you, okay, I think I would probably have something on sigmoids here. Allow me to share my screen. It'll just take a moment. Let's see. Sigmoid curves. All right, there we are. So this is your typical sigmoid curve. You can map the life cycle of anybody on this, a person, a leader, or a product, or a business organization. If you notice, there are 4 stages to the curve. The first is what we call the learning phase. So when we started our careers, or when we started our leadership journey, when we were first-time leaders and then, managers, we came in from individual contributors. We were just managing ourselves before that. So there was a learning phase before we learned the ropes to become a first-time manager. A lot of time goes in that, a lot of effort goes in that. Progress is slow, which is why you see that negative growth rate there, because time is passing by, but you don't see visible changes. Most people give up in the learning stage itself. The same is true for products, same is true for businesses, which is why 9 out of 10 businesses fail within the first year, right? Because they've given up in the learning stage itself. Businesses which persist with learning move into the growth phase. Now, if you notice, the growth at this stage within the same time is significant. That's where you make a lot of money. That's where your profit margins are high. When you get stuck here, you become complacent here. Think back to Blockbuster, think back to Kodak, think back to all these companies which went bust. When you get complacent, you don't innovate. You don't think beyond. You don't look for new blue oceans. And that is when your business starts moving into the third stage, which is maturity. You're still making money, but you're growing at a pace which is much less than stage 2. And if you still do not change, which means you're not agile enough, you're not responsive to the market realities, you end up in stage 4, which is called decline. Moving out of decline takes mammoth effort. And I have not seen too many organizations in the last 30, 35 years of my career who've been able to move out of that. Okay. So what is the recipe, Sriram asked? The recipe is, and we call that sigmoid surfing, So for people here who've been to the Balis and the Hawaiis and Goa and are used to surfing, you know how we surf, right? You take the surfboard, you wait for the wave to go up, you jump onto that. And now when you're on that, before it goes down, because then you're declined, you've gone. Before it goes down, you look for the next wave which is emerging, you jump onto that, that takes you high, and then you keep repeating the process. You can do the same, whether it's a business, a product, your company, or yourself as a leader. Sigmoid surfing. So this is how it works. If you notice the red curve, while the person is still at a growth stage before they enter maturity, they start building new competencies, new capabilities, which will be required in the emerging future. So while the other people are still sitting on what they have, these guys have started building new capabilities, new competencies. The going is tough, but by the time their existing capabilities get them into a maturity stage and potential decline, they have now been able to get into the growth stage with new capabilities. And before they would decline, they actually, instead of declining now, move up. This is how the curve looks. So if you notice, instead of moving into decline, people who continuously surf the sigmoid curve keep going up. As a coach to more than 3,500 people over the last 20 years across more than 16 countries, across as many industries, I can tell you the one thing I've seen, which is common across all leaders who really, really excelled and have been agile leaders, is their innate ability to keep reinventing themselves. Pichai has done this. Satya has done this. These are well-known names, but there are a lot of other people who are heading large businesses, large functions, who we may not know of as easily, but I see them doing it. So if I were you, what I would ask myself is, what is the next growth going to happen? Where is the next growth going to happen? Which are the growth avenues in my industry or outside my industry? What are the skills or capabilities that will be required for that? Do I have them? If I don't have them, how do I start building the journey to develop those capabilities? That is my new sigmoid curve. So by the time I become extinct, I have built new capabilities, which then help continue my growth forward. Sriram, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. And I think I have a lot more follow-ups to ask, but I think in the interest of time, I'm going to, kind of stop here. And we had some fantastic stories and, examples, which people will certainly take away. And we will, of course, put up the recording and the snippets, on social media. But I'm going to, before we close, if there are a few quick questions from the audience, we'd love to, kind of take them. I know we're going a little bit over time, but, if there's something that the audience would like to ask or comment on, please feel free to do that.
Sriram, Prabhakar here. So, Jag, the question that I had was, while you sort of made out the case for agile leadership, but are there any pitfalls that agile leaders should be cautious about?
Great question. Allow me to break it up into two parts. And one of the participants, one of the audience members asked this question in the beginning. They said, we've heard of agile in engineering. See, a lot of organizations introduce agile methodologies and frameworks, whether it's Scrum, Kanban, XP, Lean, all of that. That's what we call doing agile. But that's not going to succeed if the ecosystem or the cultural environment in which you are placing those methodologies or frameworks are conducive. So I've seen a lot of organizations fail where you're using brilliant agile frameworks, but the culture is what we call a control culture or a competence-based culture versus a collaborative or a cultivation culture. Now, I know we don't have the time to get into culture here, but you can read about this, or I'd be happy to send you notes on this via Sriram later on. One of the things that leaders need to be careful about, even when introducing agile frameworks in organizations, is does my cultural environment support agile or not? The second thing is, while I am looking at introducing certain behaviors into the system, it's important not to rush them too much. People take time to adapt to change. I have to be very conscious about what stage those people are on the curve of change. At some stages, I may need to counsel them. At some stages, I may need to handhold them. Some stages, I may need to nudge them. If an agile leader loses patience, it may actually work backwards, which is why, being conscious of the change process is also important. You may refer the Kubler-Ross change curve later on. You will find there are different stages. An agile leader, really a successful agile leader, would be conscious of where his or her people are on that stage at any time and use different strategies to manage them through that change curve. Okay, Prabhakar? All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Any other questions? Anybody else?
In case you would like to send your questions later on, you can write to Sriram and I'd be happy to address those questions later on also. We will be, I'm assuming, Sriram, you'll be putting this up on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah. We
So-
put up the post and the...
Hello, Sriram. I have a small question. I'm Colonel Prashant Mishra. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So, Jag, thanks for a wonderful session. And whatever you told, it's very contemporary and very applicable in the corporate world. I'm from the military. I just want to know that the military culture per se is slightly different from the corporate culture. And your tips on the agile leadership, certainly they fit in some ways where we should imbibe and we can benefit. But I want to know what is your tip for military per se? Because it's very hard for us to totally adapt to agile leadership, because straight-jacketed operation, mission orders, positional leadership. So that what you put in red was because I am from the military. That's why the positional leadership is one big thing for us. Can I have your word on that?
Prashant, firstly, let me tell you how happy I am that you verbalize this. By the way, I myself come from a defense background. My father's ex-army. My father-in-law comes from the Navy, so I have a lot of respect for the forces. And again, thank you so much for your service. There are 4 cultural quadrants when we talk about culture. You have control culture, which is also called the command culture. Then you have competence, then you have collaboration and cultivation. Historically, across the world, the armed forces have predominantly what we call a command culture. Now, for the army, for instance, it is important to have that. So the command culture is not a bad culture. See, when we talk about cultures and agile, we talk about which culture is right at what point in time. 30 years ago, a control and command culture, I would have said, is way better than any of the other cultural quadrants for most organizations. Why? Because information was concentrated in the hands of the senior leaders. So it had to be passed down the hierarchy. If I didn't have access to information, I couldn't be expected to take decisions for myself, right? So I had to have somebody telling me what to do. But today, when the information is distributed, it's democratized, command cultures in the context of agility tend to suffer. The only area where a control and command culture is still recommended is the armed forces. Okay. Imagine a situation where General Sriram and Brigadier Bhanver are sitting, and we have another Brigadier Prashant over there, and we are all discussing what should be the next thing to do, and we are in the midst of the battle, and there are firing happening for all over. By the time we come to a consensus, we are all dead. Somebody has to take a very quick decision there. There may not be time for collaboration or consensus. You take a decision. Having said that, I notice even in the armed forces, now certain changes are happening. So for instance, when I'm in the field, I may not collaborate on a decision that needs to be taken rapidly. But when I am strategizing, I will collaborate and make sure I take inputs from all the people who are competent to contribute on that strategic decision. So I see even the armed forces moving towards embracing more contribution, more collaboration, more empowerment from within the system. Will they match up to a corporate sector's agility norms? I doubt it. Should they even match up to it? Probably the answer is no. So the agility for the armed forces will always lie somewhere between where they were and where the corporate sector is today. So they will take certain elements of agile leadership, but the rest will be very different for the armed forces.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prashant, for joining in. All right, I think in the interest of time, I'm going to pause here. We can go on for a longer time, but please engage with our posts on LinkedIn, continue to have the dialogue and, kind of thing. We'll try and tag those people that, who have participated here so that you can, kind of comment and, kind of give us your feedback as well. Thank you, Jag, for your time, your input, some fantastic stories, lots of things I think which we can take away from the session. Appreciate your time and preparation that went into, kind of delivering this session. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Sriram, for having me here. And thank you everyone amongst the audience for having participated. Always a pleasure to interact with people. That keeps my learning going. So thank you very much again. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Prabhakar. Good to see you.